We were just talking about this the other morning because I do remember it was 1968, right? Mm-hmm. It was a very eventful year in any number of ways. Lyndon Johnson, I remember, said, I'm not going to run for president. Then, of course, I do remember driving home from, I think it was the after party for my senior prom, as I recall. And I remember turning on the radio, and I got the news that Robert Kennedy had been shot, and there was one very famous clip that was being run at that time in the middle of the night. And that was, of course, the guy saying, grab it. I can't remember, was it Rayford Johnson? I can't remember who it was. Essentially, you hear in the background, get his gun, break his hand if you have to. No, it was the news guy that was saying it, right?
Well, we're going to find out.
Yeah.
We can get the precise wording and all of that because it's been 40 years, and at the time it was called an open and shut case right from the very beginning. But there are two investigators who feel that that is not the case, that it was not an open and shut case. They are Phil Van Praag and Robert Joling, and they have written a book, and they presented their findings just recently here in Connecticut, both at UNH and I think at a larger conference at the Mohegan Sun. And you can also find out more about their theories on their website and openandshutcase.com. And good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Am I pronouncing your names correctly?
Yes.
Van Praag and Joling.
Yes.
Okay, so it did seem from what we saw on television, it did seem from what at least we heard about the Los Angeles Police Department investigation, that it was pretty obvious that Sirhan Sirhan was there. People saw him raise his hand and fire his weapon at close range at Kennedy. So what is there to question about that?
Well, the first thing to question is the position of the people that were firing the guns. Secondly, it was a question of whether or not Sirhan was close enough to the senator to even be able to shoot him from behind. And thirdly, the number of bullets that were fired within the pantry that evening.
In many cases, gentlemen, what happens is, and certainly in the case of the Kennedy, his brother, John Kennedy, back in Dallas years ago, there were people who came forward and said, no, that's not the way it happened. I know I saw somebody on the grassy knoll. Somebody says, I heard 5, 6 shots. I mean, in other words, there were people who came forward questioning the findings of the Warren Commission and beyond that. Were there people who came forward in this situation? Obviously not as many people around, but nevertheless, were there people who came forward and said, I'm not sure that's the way it happened, or was this something that you just wanted to look into?
Yes. May I answer that, Phil? Yes. Don Schulman, who was a runner for one of the stations, immediately following the shooting, made the statement that the guard pulled his gun, fired it 3 times, and hit the senator all 3 times. The Los Angeles Police Department summarily dismissed that, told him he was wrong, even though they were not present when it happened.
So, run us through that night, because here's kind of where I'm going to go with this. Once again, was it that testimony then that made you think, gee, we need to look into this? I mean, I have so many things I don't remember. Was there an autopsy? I mean, we're all kinds of things. So just go through that, and what happened after that shooting?
Well, one of the things that happened, there were 4 bullets into Kennedy and 5 bullets into other bystanders. That made 9 bullets. So the count out of a 8-shot revolver that Sirhan was holding
would be hard to do.
Would be very difficult.
All right, and then when you look at, was an autopsy done? Was a forensic inquiry done? Did we have, as we did with John Kennedy, did we have kind of the body outline and we show where the holes are and all that? Did we have that?
Yes.
Okay, and how many shots were fired then into Robert Kennedy?
3 into his body, 1 into his suit coat up at the top seam. And then 5 other people besides him were fired upon and hit.
So we obviously have, I think it was...
Why would that be ignored or discredited or discounted by the L.A. police? Because wouldn't that indicate, didn't you say that his weapon was an 8-shot revolver?
Yes.
So if we're talking right away about more bullets than that weapon can hold, why didn't that, raise a lot of red flags at the time?
Probably because of who the criminalist was on this case, who wanted to solve the case and give the boss what the boss wanted and go home.
Mm-hmm. Even knowing that this was going to be one of the biggest cases of, modern day history?
Well, that made him a hero if he could solve it immediately, and that seems to be the case more than whether getting at the truth.
Okay, well, you go into a number of different things in the book. One of the things is a recording that was made by a journalist who apparently inadvertently left his tape recorder on as he was leaving the room where Kennedy had spoken, right?
That's correct.
Okay, tell me a little bit about what that shows.
Okay, the recording itself was made by an independent journalist originally from Poland by the name of Stanislaw Pruszynski, and that recording was uncovered in May of 2004 by an American journalist by the name of Brad Johnson, who's a senior news writer for CNN International. And that particular recording, what we found is three discoveries. The first was the presence of 13 or more shot sounds on that recording. The second was two instances of what we call double shots. In other words, two shots that occurred so closely together as to preclude the possibility of having come from a single weapon.
All right.
And the third discovery then was 5 of the shot sounds that displayed a particular frequency anomaly, and that is one particular frequency that was heard to be quite a bit louder than the other frequencies and did not conform to the overall level of the other shot sounds at that frequency. So in order to try to determine what the cause of this anomaly was, we conducted firing range tests of the Ivor Johnson Cadet 55, which is the weapon that Sirhan had, and also what's called an H&R 922, which is also a .22 caliber revolver, and one that happened to have the same rifling characteristics as the Ivor Johnson. And basically, the result was that the H&R 922 exhibited the same frequency anomaly when measured from the rear as was found in the Pruszynski recording, and Pruszynski's microphone was facing the rear of the second gun.
So what does that mean? I'm not following.
What that basically means is that, first of all, it establishes the presence of a second gun in and of itself, beyond the first two discoveries. And secondly, it determines that the make and model of that second gun was most likely this H&R 922. And what's particularly significant about that is that the security guard, who was positioned right behind Senator Kennedy and slightly to his right at the time of the shooting,